If, instead of rebooting movies, it became a trend to retell them from a different character's perspective, what film would you want to see retold and from whose point of view? Matrix, but from the perspective of a regular police detective trying to stop the murder spree of these crazy people who kill everybody without reason. At one point he would interrogate Neo. So you believe that nothing is real? That's why you can kill random people? Because they don't exist? No. The world is fake but the people are real. And you kill them anyway? That sounds like it could be exceptionally fun if the cop in question begins to learn to bend the rules of the Matrix. He is exposed to enough of the rebels' antics to believe and seek out the truth and how to use/experience it, but still decidedly falls on the side of people still living in the system, defending the innocents who are callously overlooked in this higher-level war. They mostly get their ass kicked, but manage to save just enough people, just enough of the time, to maintain a morale and sense of purpose. Later on, the Smith virus takes hold and they desperately try to create a hidden community in this world, meant to parallel the rebels' colony in the real world, and just as that begins to hopelessly fall in upon itself, the final fight ensues upon Neo's return. Okay, so this is like the third Matrix comment I've read so far. We all clearly want a Matrix reboot and I think this would be an amazing reboot idea. Like just keep the Matrix as a concept and create a new series of films. 1. Detective origin story of how they got their Matrix spending powers. Plot of becoming some sort of bounty hunter for the system to hunt the rebels down before ultimately quitting and realizing that a fake reality has no meaning and they no longer want to serve as a detective or a defender for their reality. 2. Detective learns of the prophecy and has to protect them and mentor them through the Matrix. Enemy could be more bounty hunters or maybe a virus trying to track them down. 3. Prophecy is now strong enough to do whatever it is to disrupt the Matrix from the inside of the Matrix, however this isn't enough to stop the robots. Said disruption allows the humans to release a huge portion of the battery population. 4. The Matrix is rebooted but is updated and traps the rebels inside of it, tricking them into thinking that they have in fact left the Matrix. This gives up the locations of the few militarized human strongholds still in existence. The protagonist must rescue the other rebels from the Matrix prison while the final war plays out. Edit, so I've now been made aware that we are getting a Matrix 4. Although I wasn't aware of this, I still stand by what I said about a full reboot being what we need rather than a fourth story added to the end of an okay trilogy. The story of how Grandpa Joe got into bed and then decided to just stay there, the lazy old cunt. Explain yourself. /Grandpa Joe hate. Toy Story. Andy, a young boy who enjoys playing with his toys in his spare time, often wanders into his room to find things off. Something may have moved, a toy may have vanished only to reappear the next day. Voices are heard from his room from the ground floor only to hear a slight panic then silence whenever he approaches the room again. And imagine, one day, if he heard this talking once again only to walk into his room, hear the split-second shock to silence just to see his favorite cowboy toy laying on the floor. Only this time, just before he laid his eyes on the toy, he could see in the corner of his eye the left hand of Woody just slightly flop to the ground. Flop to the ground as if he just fell. But, how could a toy fall if it was laying on the ground to begin with? That's if it was laying on the ground the whole time. He begins to think that he is never truly alone in his room anymore and those beady toy eyes that face him in the night while he's sleeping aren't just facing him out of chance. They're watching him. They're looking. And he isn't alone. Nor was he ever alone. This is the tale of a boy who loses his mind at the thought that he has never been alone for his entire life and that the friends he made growing up may be a little more real than he first thought. A little too real. Willy Wonka from the point of view of an Oompa Loompa who is working to ignite a slave rebellion amongst his people. Oompa Loompa Doopity Dad sees the means of production, comrades. Oompa Loompa Dooba Dee Doo, who benefits from the labor we do. We organized to vouch for our few, then Willy candied the head of our crew. We still live and work for him too, solidarity's our only way through. Oompa loompa dooba dee dee, fight the man so someday we're free. It's a Wonderful Life from Mary, the wife's point of view. Married to a dreamer with fits of depression, while raising 4 kids, rebuilding a beautiful old Victoria house, helping him make his dream passion of helping his community come true and trying to protect him from his loser uncle, all while watching him spiral into a deeper and deeper depression. Will she be able to help him out of it? Edit, changed dream to passion. Absolutely, she can help him out of it. I'd almost argue that Mary is the most important character in that movie. She drives a large amount of the action. Who declares marriage at the age of like 8? Mary. Who offers their honeymoon money to save the bank? Mary. Who goes around asking neighbors and friends for help against the feds when George goes missing? Mary. She's the best. Not to mention buying an old house and fixing it up while having 4 kids underfoot and helping all the working class neighbors move into their new homes, dealing with a mother who obviously didn't like her choice in husbands and constantly being an optimist. Movie should have been called It's a Wonderful Wife. I get a little ticked at George every time he goes up the stairs and gets pissy because she hasn't gotten around to fixing the banister yet. I love this movie. It's 100% my favorite movie of all time, to the point that I had a custom Etsy artist make a drawing of me lassoing the moon for my wife and I gave it to her on our wedding day during my vows to her. So, the one thing that always bothered me about the movie is during George's journey with Clarence, Mary never gets married and becomes an old maid. If George wasn't around, surely she would have gone with Sam Wainwright to New York and probably lived a miserable life there while he womanized and whatnot. I mean, anything other than the old maid thing. My wife and I always chuckle about this because compared to his brother and his mother, Mary becoming an old maid was played like it was so horrible by Clarence and George. Frozone. Where was his supersuit? Frozone and his wife as a romantic comedy. Is she super? Is she ordinary? Does that make the least difference to her? Just keep the gag of never showing her on screen. But still make the entire movie cantered around her. Edit, centered, not cantered. Star Wars from the Empire's POV, basically telling the story about this terrorist group that was planning the biggest act of terrorism in the galaxy's history, the destruction of a military peacekeeping star base. We follow the Empire's anti-terrorism unit as they try to find the spies transporting the stolen plans and head off the attack. Not a retelling of any of the movies, but there was a Star Wars novel in the 90s where each chapter retold the same story from a different character's point of view, with most chapters extending the story and occasionally introducing new characters, who then got a turn in the spotlight in a later chapter. It was my favorite Star Wars novel. Edit, I couldn't remember the title, but others have posted the titles, apparently there were a few of them. Rather than try and get them all here, I'm going to say read on, as there are many excellent suggestions including Beyond Star Wars. John Wick would become a horror film. There's a couple scenes where he just comes off as this horrible unstoppable machine, a whole movie of that would be wild. Foot soldiers pissing themselves because they know Wick is gonna murk them but they have no option but to die fighting. I still like the part where he talks to the one bodyguard casually then ends it with "Why don't you take the night off?" and they'd reply "I think I will." He knows exactly what is about to go down and he just nopes the fuck out without hesitation. Saving Private Ryan from Private Ryan's point of view. It's most just him slogging in the army until Captain Miller shows up. I never really got why they sacrificed a whole platoon squad of men to save him. Was there some sort of moral I missed? Edit, okay guys, chill out, I get it now. And I know the difference between a platoon and a squad, I just got the words mixed up. To the best of my knowledge, in 1942 the US DoD implemented Directive 1315.15 Special Separation Policies for Survivorship, also known as the Only Son or Sole Surviving Son policy, which was designed to protect lone remaining family members from military duty. So in the movie, Ryan's three brothers have been killed, making him his mother's last son. As a result of this, Miller and his men are tasked with tracking down Private Ryan, pulling him out of the war and making sure he gets home safe. Shrek, from the bear child's point of view. At the start of the movie you can see Mummy Bear and Daddy Bear and the child all in a cage, and later you can see the child bear crying into Daddy Bear. Lord Farquaad is then later shown to have a bear mat. Edit 1, when child bear is crying into Daddy Bear, Mommy Bear is missing. Edit 2, okay, so now I know that the bear mat was 100% Mummy Bear. I remember the feel of her hand on my face. She was love. She was light. She was comfort and grace. And she gave me her heart and I held it in mine. And I knew for a while, we were fine. But they took her away for some counterfeit sin. And the lights all went out. And the darkness came in. And I picture her smile in the silence, and yet, as the years slip away, I begin to forget. Milan, from Captain Li Shang's point of view. He starts having feelings for one of his soldiers, thinking he's gay. Then he finds out that Ping is actually a girl in disguise. Good news, I'm not gay. Bad news, I'm supposed to chop her head off. Lord of the Rings trilogy from Sauron's perspective. 1. Your order has been dispatched. Unfortunately it is delayed due to being misplaced in transit. 2. Your order is out for delivery. Please be in between the hours of November and January to sign for your package. 3. Your delivery has been placed in a safe place. Despite being home, I did not hear the bell, and oh no, it's been tossed over the back wall and ended up in my pond. I just reread Hunger Games, and Peter, Haymitch, Finnick, or Sinner's perspectives would be fun. Katniss is very inside herself, and so the movies are more open to the reality of the situation than the books. I'd like a Harry Potter story from the last year at Hogwarts when the trio wasn't there, like maybe Ginny and Neville. Pepper Potts from the MCU could be fun. Twilight, from the father's view. It would actually be interesting, and not derivative smutty shit. Supernatural creatures seem to be lusting for this man's daughter, as he tries to research everything he can, keep it secret from his daughter, who's obviously under the sway of supernatural influence, therefore cannot be trusted. He collects evidence, tries to prove it to fringe people, and eventually rational scientists, all while unearthing an ever deeper and more terrifying secret society of actual blood-drinking vampires that controls the globe. I'd watch the fuck out of that. Harry Potter from Hermione's perspective? I'd like to see it from Neville Longbottom's view. The child who could have been the chosen one. I'd love to find out more about his family, if his life was as terrible as living with the Dursleys, about fine friends who actually liked him and treated him well. Plus the fact that he also killed the last known Horcrux. Passengers from the perspective of Chlor's character. Pretty surprised this wasn't the top comment. First thing that came to mind when I read this post. This change infinitely improves the movie, changing it from a surface-level, forgettable love story to a suspense story that questions the true nature of humanity when hopelessly isolated. She could wake up, find out another passenger's pod malfunctioned, and spend the first act of the movie with the two of them working together to try to fix it and then ultimately falling in love. The next act could be her slowly realizing the truth, that he selfishly woke her on purpose due to a weird combination of hopelessness, boredom, and lust, and her dealing with that. She could either kill him, or he could still sacrifice himself for her as an act of redemption. Then the final scene is her going through the passenger archives, and becoming fixated on one particularly attractive guy. Credits roll and the audience is left to decide whether she made the same choice that he did, even after being a victim to it. That version is so much more thought-provoking, and it's so obvious that I can't help but wonder if it was the initial plan but it didn't test well with focus groups. Back to the Future from Biff's point of view. Batman, Dark Knight from the Joker's point of view. Beetlejuice from Beetlejuice's point of view. Say 7N from Kevin Spacey's character's point of view. Fight Club from several other members' point of view. Any movie with big fight scenes and massive destruction. I want a POV from random people who are in the middle of it, like a small business owner. Just a dude going about his daily routine, then boom. A random car comes through and he has to deal with the aftermath.